Welcome to the Branding Expert Show. I am Susie Liberator, owner and art director of Visions to Images, and I help businesses get their branding on track with my unique strategies and processes. With over a decade of experience, I helped corporations and mid-sized businesses create an unforgettable vision identity. I'm excited to have this podcast so that everybody can learn a little bit about branding as well as the entrepreneur world, because we all know how tough and rough it can be. So without further ado, I want to announce today's guest.
Hello. Today I have Chad Cochran on my podcast. He is a landscape photographer and he is amazing at his photography. I love looking at it. And he also has, I didn't want to tell you a series, so I'm kind of excited for him to share a little bit about both of those. Hi, Chad.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing great.
Good. So tell us a little bit about how you got started in this photography end of things.
Sure. I'm actually a really late bloomer. So I'm 48 years old now, and I didn't own a camera until I was 40. So my wife actually bought me a camera, and I always jokingly kind of say that she kind of handed it to me and said, okay, why don't you go find something to do now? But it's, I grew up in a really small town. And so when I got the camera, what I found myself drawn to were a lot of the same things that I saw growing up. So it was old barns, farmhouses, those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of I always jokingly refer to it as like the darker side of Ohio. So it's like the darker settings.
Right.
And I got into that and did it for several years until probably like 5 years ago, somebody for the first time asked me, I think the question was, or the statement was, you take really pretty pictures of Ohio. Would you ever consider putting a person in those? And so that's kind of what initiated me, I wouldn't say transitioning, but in addition to doing the landscape stuff, I also have now found myself being a portrait photographer.
Yes, and both of them are amazing. I love the landscapes, and you just did Leanne's photos, and I love seeing how you kind of have different styles for each, but it still is you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I'm pretty lucky now that I've been doing this for a while now, that I'm always worried that when I start working with a new client, they're going to want something that they saw online, or they're going to want to, I always talk about like how the Snapchat filters make people look like the bottom of a porcelain cup. So, and I'm always worried that's going to be part of the conversation, or that may be what their expectation. But the good news is that I now have created such a large portfolio of work that a lot of people that come to me are coming to me because of my style. And so a lot of the conversations that I have up front with clients is I go, what are you looking for? And a lot of times they'll be like, no, just do what you do.
Right.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah, Snapchat's so funny. I don't have Snapchat. I don't do filters. Like, I'm like, if people do it, I'm like, why? Like, what's the point? So that's funny that you're like that too. Cause I'm like, I don't know. Like, kids are kind of a different thing, but when it comes to like people and business and stuff, I'm like, why? So
I only have it because my oldest, our 18-year-old, it's the only way he'll communicate with me. So that I found that, and then our daughter, middle child doesn't use it as much, but our daughter will. She likes to do like the funny filter, like get the dog,
right?
All that stuff. So,
but for kids, it's different, So yeah, and it's funny that you say like, they come for your style and stuff, because if they look at your work, they obviously know what you're capable of. So they probably want that style already. You have so much work online that people can just say, yes, I want that. So I guess it's a toss up. It's always probably hard when people come to you, hoping that they want what you have, or try not to tell you what to do. You know what I mean? It's like you go to a hairdresser. It's the same thing.
Yeah. What I have found, especially I work so much in the music field, so many musicians, I had this misperception that with most people, they would come to me and they would have like these grandiose ideas, and they would be like, this is what we're going to do. This is what I want. This is what I need to have. And I would say, with the exception of like maybe one or two people who wanted to try something specific, most people come to me and go, what do I do? Like, it's like, tell me to move. If I have hair in my face, brush it out of my face. What if this shirt doesn't look good with this backdrop, tell me and I'll switch into a different shirt. And so that was a learning experience. I think when I first started, luckily I have a career of being in sales my entire life. So I've never struggled to have a conversation with people. And so transitioning to doing portrait photography, it really becomes more of a conversation. It's you want to hold a conversation with somebody, and you just want to be the guy that happens to have a camera in their hand while it's happening. And so I found that what I was going to say is most people will come to me and they're actually looking for direction. They're not looking to give it. So
that's good. That's really good. Yeah.
It's interesting. Definitely it's taken me some time to get comfortable enough with my work and with what I do to feel comfortable telling some of these people, no, don't do that. Or the worst conversation I have to have with people is, our best opportunity to have the most photos from this session is if we don't talk much during the session. Because usually when people talk, their mouths are open. And so if I'm taking photos and people
it's hard and you get the,
Yeah. So it's definitely, like, I like to talk a lot before, I like to talk a lot after, but we try to, when we're on, I try to shoot fast and get everything done and keep the conversations till later.
That's good. Yeah. And I think that a lot of people don't, like, a lot of photographers don't say those things. So it's good that you have that advice and experience to kind of guide them in that direction. So tell me what you're most excited about right now, as far as your photography goes.
So I think what I'm excited about now is we are, we're to provide some to, like, place the setting with where we're at right now. We're going through this pandemic. And so it's a much different feel. I'm used to being, I don't want to say, an arm's length away from somebody as I'm doing photos. And that's not the reality of what it's going to be, for quite a long time, and maybe ever again. I mean, who really knows, how this is going to play out. So instead of taking the woe is me approach and saying, oh, I used to do it like this, I don't know if I can still do that. Instead, I'm looking more towards, okay, it's a new challenge. What do I do next? What do my portraits look like now? Can I still use my studio that I have at 78th Street Studios in Cleveland? I'm like, I don't know if I can. Like, I don't know if I can appropriately social distance and do photos. And if I can't do it that way, what's the next phase look like? So I'm in that mode right now that I'm really looking forward to trying to create and find new ways to make a new set of pictures from it, kind of expanding my portfolio in a different way than I've had in the past.
That's interesting. I'm curious to see how you're going to do it and what you're going to do, because it's definitely a challenge for sure. I mean, everything's changing and shifting. We know that. So it's kind of like, how do we do it? How do we trust, like you said?
Right. And, living in Cleveland, like we do, we live in Northeast Ohio. It's usually not our friend. We don't get a ton of sunny days, which is great for me. I like to shoot when it's not quite as sunny out. But, I think things will become even more weather permitting. And I have done some test shoots outside, and I think that's where a lot of them may take place moving forward. So it's just the unknown. So it's trying to not let the unknown become anchors, but instead trying to look at them differently and find something new and fun to do with it.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I know you kind of did some the other day and you were like, I maintain social distance.
Yeah, like it's somebody I've known for a long time, and we're like, okay, and I've had other people reach out to me about doing portraits. I have a musician that lives down in Kentucky who wants to come up, and I was like, let's talk. Like, let's get on the phone and walk this through and figure this out. And this weekend, because it was somebody I knew, I was able to stay very far away and do it appropriate from the social distancing standpoint. And the photos still turned out great. So I was excited one, it gave me a little bit of confidence. I was like, okay, this can actually happen. This can really,
Right.
this can still, it's not dead. Like I can find a way to make this work. But it was new. It was different too. So it was, did quite a bit outside, and we use more sunlight than I usually do. I usually shoot in pitch black. That way I have full control of the lights. So it's a new challenge for me to try something different.
Yes, absolutely. So I know that you have the I Didn't Want to Tell You series, and I think it's a fantastic series. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Probably, I lose track of time now. Maybe like 5 years ago, I was in Nashville and I came up with this idea. I had started doing portraits and working with musicians. And what I found is part of those conversations that I referred to, like where I would talk to people at the beginning and kind of get to know them a little bit. And sometimes I would spend 30 minutes with somebody during a session. Sometimes I would spend 3 hours with somebody, just depended on, what our day looked like. And what I found is that there were a lot of commonalities in the stories that they were telling me. There were a lot of people who had dealt with mental health issues, depression, alcoholism, drugs, childhood trauma, and the list went on. So what I started thinking about, and at the same time, I was dealing with my father, who was chemically dependent on prescription drugs. And so I was struggling with that myself, and at the same time trying to be creative in figuring, how can I take these puzzle pieces and kind of put them together. And so what I decided to do was, the first concept, it was still going to be called I Didn't Want to Tell You, but the first concept was going to be, tell me a secret. Tell me a secret about something that you've never told anybody else. And I had a handful of people that were like, oh, that's a cool idea. I'm not going to do it, but it's a cool it's a cool idea. And I was like, oh, I feel like this can work. I need to, I need to work on this. And so I don't want to say that I'm bullheaded, but it took some time for this to develop into me changing the way that I approached people. So now when I approach people, it's changed drastically. Now it is, tell me how mental health has played a role in your life. And that provides people a little bit of opportunity where it can be a more fluid exchange. So if they want to talk about themselves, they can. They want to talk about an aunt, uncle, friend, brother, sister, whatever it is, they can do that. So most people tend to talk about themselves, but sometimes people will talk a little bit more about their childhood, and it's been incredibly successful. I've had, it was published last fall in a magazine called No Depression, which has nothing to do with mental health. It just happens to be the name of the magazine. And I now have utilized your wonderful talents to help me to build the website. And so that's I didn't want to tell you.com. And I've now taken those stories, those 6 initial stories, and those are all have been uploaded. And we've uploaded, I don't know how many are on there, maybe 15 or 20 at this point. So people, so if anybody wants to visit the site, get a handle on it. And then I just expanded it. Initially, the project started where I needed to be the photographer. I wanted to have more control over it. But there were so many people from different locations who wanted to participate, and it just didn't make sense for me to be able to fly to LA or Austin or wherever it is. And it's not what I do full time, so it's tough to do that. So what I ended up doing was I have 2 different things. I've enlisted some other photographers who are willing to help whenever we get into the next phase of whatever the new normal is. But I've also opened it up, so if people have a portrait that's already been done of them and they really like it, we can utilize it too. So
that's amazing. Yeah.
So it's definitely opened up the series, and I'm excited to see where that keeps going to.
Yeah, that's so great that it's expanding. And I know you've had the features, and I've got to stand by you for a little bit of it. So it's amazing to kind of see it grow and evolve. I mean, yeah, you said we had like 6 that you started with on the website, and now you already have double that. So that's amazing that people are responding so well to it.
For sure.
So my last question for you is, if you could kind of give any advice to somebody who is like maybe starting off an entrepreneur, sales, or photography, because I mean, you kind of have all 3 of those. What advice would you give them?
So I think the thing that's so difficult for creatives
Mm-hmm.
is oftentimes they really struggle with it all, with marrying the creative component and the business component. You usually find them to be one or the other. They're like
Yeah.
super creative and don't really have themselves grounded in business in any way. And then you have some people who are really just business people that maybe are not very creative. So I think one of the tricks is finding how can you do both, and how can you truly run it as a business and still be creative. So that would be one thing I would say is talk to your friends that are doing it, talk to other people that are doing it. Most people are very open to
Oh
talk.
yeah.
They what I say is there's so many photographers and everybody has so many different styles that me providing insight to somebody who lives in Nashville or me providing insight to somebody who lives in Columbus, Ohio,
Right.
isn't going to affect me personally. I could talk to 5 people in Cleveland and it's probably not going to affect me personally.
Right.
So I would say, try to build a network of people that you trust and that you can have those kind of conversations with. The other thing I would say is don't be afraid of self-promotion. Like, you need to have quality work. You need to be good at what you do. So obviously hone in that skill, but don't be afraid to sell yourself. I mean, with the way social media works right now, and with the algorithms that Facebook and Instagram have put in place, it's really tough to get recognized.
Right.
So I have a long history of being on Instagram. I've probably been on there for, I don't even know, 8-9 years, something like that at this point. And it's definitely different now than what it used to be. I
Sure.
sometimes will get 10 or 20% of my followers who will even see, one of my pictures. So don't be afraid. Utilize Instagram stories. If you are on Instagram and you use Instagram stories. Sometimes I get more people that look at my stories than will interact with one of my photos. So that would be the big thing. So I would say find a group of people that you can trust that can help answer business questions if that happens to be an area that you struggle with. And then don't be afraid of self-promotion. Do good work first. Be kind to people. And I think that's a huge component. There are a lot of people that are great photographers who maybe have a different approach. So make sure that you're somebody that people want to work with. Create a lasting impression on people, and it's no different than any other business. If you do really good work, you're going to have that person go and tell 10 of their friends.
Right.
And if you do terrible work, or if you're an idiot, they're probably going to tell 30 of their friends.
Right, for sure.
So that, it's kind of the old adage. So be kind, do good work, find a network of people that you can trust, and be kind to people.
Yeah, I agree. And the whole don't be afraid to be self-promoting, like that's huge. So many people, I mean, especially when I started in that sense, like I was afraid to be promoted. I was afraid to tell people prices. I was afraid of all of that, or didn't want to do it. And now you just do it and you just get over it. And you have to, if you want to make a living or make your hobby a profession, like just do it, because otherwise it's not going to be anything other than that.
Right. And I'm pretty lucky because I told you that I had a history in sales. And without getting I try not to mix in too many business terms into my daily conversations, but sales is a numbers game. And so, the more impressions that you make on people, the more opportunities or the more quotes you get to put out there for jobs, the higher probability that you're going to get more and more work. And you should know that you're only going to get a small percentage of those quotes that you put out there.
Right. Yeah.
Right. You're definitely you're going to lose more business than you're going to gain. But the key is to continually be out there growing your opportunities. And the more opportunities that you have, the greater opportunity you'll have to get some of those and turn them into clients.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. So I have on here cowtownchad.com, and I didn't want to tell you .com are your 2 websites that people can check you out on. Is there anything else you would like to share?
I don't think you can find me on any social media under Cowtown Chad. I used to live in Columbus. I always feel like I need to explain that.
Gotcha.
But they used to call Columbus Cowtown years and years ago because Ohio State used to be in
That makes, I always wondered about that. So I'm glad you verified that with me, because I was like, where did he get this name?
Yeah, like there's even a really cool guitar shop called Cowtown Guitars that now is no longer in Columbus. It's in Las Vegas. So a lot of people utilize that term. And my last job, I tried to do it because I wanted some anonymity. I wanted people to know that this is just a hobby. It's what I do.
Right.
So I wanted that. Now, cat's out of the bag. People know who.
Yeah.
People know
Yeah,
what
exactly.
know what's up, and so, yeah, I always jokingly say that I know what it's like to be in a band with a terrible name. For whatever reason, I picked Cowtown Chad, and it stuck. So that's who I am now.
That's all right, though. That's all right. It's memorable. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for listening in to the Branding Expert podcast today with Susie Libertor. We hope that you were able to take away some great stuff, and make sure to check out the links from your guest expert and branding expert that was on today's episode.